Welcome to the Parsha Themes Shir. It's another double Parsha this week, Acharei Mos, Kedoshim. And it is for the Refuah Shalema of Moshe Shimon ben Leah Esther Chaya Halevi. So we start off, the Torah is eternal. It does not change with the times. And he may not enter the Kodesh HaKadoshim, the inner chamber of the Beis HaMikdash, of the temple, at all times. God commands to the Kohen Gadol that he may only enter the Kodesh HaKadoshim, the inner chamber of the Beis HaMikdash, on Yom Kippur, when performing the special avodah or service, which the Torah proceeds to outline here in our Parsha, and not v'chol eis, at all times. Say our sages, ha'oseh toroso itim harizeh mefer bris. Someone who approaches Torah in a manner of times is considered in breach of our covenant with Hashem. Rav Menachem ben Zion Sachs says this refers to a person who makes the Torah subject to the whims and trends of the time, who insists on having the Torah conform to what's popular and fashionable. Doing this constitutes a grave breach of the Torah. We must allow the Torah to dictate to us what to do rather than dictate to the Torah what it should say. The popular trends of the time, the widely accepted values and principles, must never be imposed on the Torah. Rav Sachs suggests, reading in the same vein the command V'al yavoi v'chol eis el HaKodesh. This could be understood to mean that we cannot enter the Kodesh, the realm of Torah, b'chol eis, with whatever ideas happen to be popular and trending at the time. We do not bring the times, the currently fashionable beliefs and values, with us into shul, into the synagogue, into the Beis HaMedrash, the study hall, into our religion. The Torah stands on its own, without yielding to what's trendy and popular, and we must never try to impose society's latest ideas onto the Torah. This reading might be applied also to the Gemara in Shabbos, that after a person leaves this world, he will stand in judgment before Hashem and will be asked, among other things, Kavata itim l'Torah, did you set times for Torah? The plain meaning is that we will be judged as to whether we designated regular times for Torah study. Additionally, however, this might refer to the question of whether we force the itim, the trends of the time, onto the Torah. We will be asked whether we remain steadfastly and unwaveringly devoted to the Torah, even in the face of societal pressure, even when this required us to oppose popular ideas and norms, or if we yielded to this pressure and modified the Torah to make it conform to conventional values. Returning to our parsha, the next pasuk commands, "Bezos yavo Aaron el HaKodesh." With this shall Aaron enter the sanctuary, and it then lists the various sacrifices that are required on Yom Kippur when the Kohen Gadol enters the Kodesh HaKadoshim, the Holy of Holies. Rav Sachs cites numerous verses where the word Zos is used in reference to the Torah, to our beliefs and our value system. The word Zos, or this, connotes definitiveness, certainty, clarity, and conviction. When we enter the Kodesh, the sanctuary, we must approach Torah and religious observance not with that mindset of itim, with a desire to impose the Torah upon the Torah, the popular trends of the time, whatever they happen to be at the present moment, but rather with Zos, with steadfast commitment to the Torah's timely principles. We live in an age of grifters, when people seek to earn fame and money by producing content and spreading ideas, often outright lies and propaganda, that will attract the most attention, that will gain them the broadest audience. These media personalities have no principles and no morals. They are entirely subject to itim, to the times, changing their attitudes and opinions to accommodate currently popular trends. As Torah Jews, we are expected to do just the opposite, to live with Zos, with firm conviction, with unwavering fealty to the Torah's values and principles, even in the face of pressure and of changing ideological fads. Now, living a life of Torah, what is that all about? U'shmartem es chukosai v'es mishpatai asher yaseh osam ha'adam v'chai behem ani Hashem. You shall observe my statutes and my laws that a person shall perform and live by them. I am Hashem. Rav Wolbe explains that the words v'chai behem imply that this is true also of Torah. It means that the Torah's laws, values and principles sustain us spiritually much the way our bodily systems such as breathing and blood circulation sustain us physically. Just as a person cannot survive if the heart stops pumping, so can we not survive spiritually if we take occasional breaks from Torah. We can do many different things in our lives, and sometimes we leave on vacation, but there cannot ever be a vacation from Torah. Living a Torah life means consistent, uninterrupted commitment. Even when we are not actually engaged in Torah learning or prayer, we must retain our connection to Torah by performing all our activities in accordance with the Torah's principles. The Torah informs the way we conduct our business affairs, the way we interact with people when shopping and running errands, the way we drive, the way we behave at home with our families, and the way we do literally anything throughout the day. This is what v'chai behem requires, that the Torah guides us at all times throughout the day and throughout our lives. This idea finds halachic expression in the distinction between Birkas HaTorah, the barachas we recite each day over Torah learning, and the barachas recited over other mitzvahs. On Sukkot, for example, we recite a bracha each time we eat a meal in the sukkah. We recite the bracha of Leishev Basukkah before eating breakfast in the morning in the sukkah, and if we then leave on a trip, we recite a new bracha when we return to the sukkah for lunch. Over the mitzvah of Talmud Torah, however, learning Torah, we recite the bracha only once a day. Even though a person goes to work and goes to many different places doing all different kinds of things, he does not repeat Birkas HaTorah, the blessings on the Torah, when he later the same day goes to a shiur or opens a book to learn. Rav Chaim of Brisk, based on a Tosfos in Maseches Brachos, explains that this bracha is not repeated because one never truly disrupts his connection to Torah. By conducting all his affairs in accordance with the Torah, he is living Torah throughout the day without interruption, and so no new bracha is needed. Now, forging forward in spirituality. Es mishpatai ta'asu ve'es chukosai tishmeru laleches bahem ani Hashem Elokeichem. Perform my laws and guard my statutes, to go in them. I am Hashem. In the midst of the parasha's outline of various mitzvahs, the Torah exhorts us with regard to our observance of the Torah in a general sense. Perform my laws and guard my statutes, to go in them. I am Hashem. The meaning of the words to go in them are unclear. What is this adding to the command to observe the Torah? The Kesav Sofer answers by explaining the Tanakh's use of the word with the opposite meaning of going, that is, omed, which means standing. It is used in relation to malachim, angels, as it says in Isaiah, the seraphim, a type of angel, stand opposite him. Malachim stand in the sense that they remain stationary in their spiritual level. They have no connection to the concept of growth. Therefore, in contrast, the Torah tells us to be in a state of going, which means that we constantly strive to improve our spiritual level and avoid remaining standing still. The Kesav Sofer makes a similar point in Parshas Bechukosai on the opening verse. If you will go in my statutes and keep my mitzvahs and do them. The Kesav Sofer writes, it is not enough that you keep the mitzvahs every day on the same level as on previous days. Rather, you should constantly climb from one level to a higher level and perform the mitzvahs in a better and more praiseworthy fashion. We see from the Kesav Sofer that in addition to keeping the mitzvahs, one must constantly strive to go forward in his avodas Hashem, his divine service, and that standing still is not an option. It seems further that with regard to human beings, there is no such concept as remaining on the same spiritual level. Rather, one is either going forward or backwards, and it is only malachim who are able to remain stationary. This idea is also expressed in an explanation of the prohibition of going up steps when approaching the Mizbeach altar when approaching to perform the divine service. Instead of steps, they were to build a ramp going up to the Mizbeach, the altar. Why must one go up a ramp as opposed to steps? When climbing up a steep ramp, one must exert forward movement merely to remain still. If he tries to be stationary, the steepness of the slope will cause him to actually go backwards. He will only remain in the same place with a certain amount of forward pressure, and he will only advance with a greater display of forward movement. In contrast, when one walks up steps, he is able to stay still without fear of falling back, since the surface he is standing on is flat. This teaches us that when we approach divine service, we must actively exert ourselves in order to remain stable, and to go forward, we need to exert ourselves greatly. The modern-day analogy of this is trying to go up an escalator that is moving down. This explanation, however, begs a new question. Why is it the case that when a person makes no active effort, he actually goes backwards as opposed to staying stationary? The reason is that the Yetzer Hara, the negative inclination, makes a constant effort to bring a person down in a spiritual level. Therefore, if the person is not making any active effort to go forward, then it is inevitable that he will be going backwards, since the Yetzer Hara will be busy pushing him back, and there will be no counteractive force to keep him steady. We have seen how fundamental active growth is to Avodas Hashem, divine service, and how there is no option of standing still in one's spirituality. This lesson is very pertinent as we strive to learn the lessons from the recent festival of Pesach. Pesach is the time when the power of renewal is at its highest level. A person who resolved to make a strong effort to grow in his Avodas Hashem will receive great siyata d'shmaya, heavenly help, on Pesach. Even after Pesach is over, we are now in the time period of Sfiras HaOmer, of counting of the Omer, a time that is particularly powerful for working on one's character traits in preparation for the receiving of the Torah. Obviously, it is important that a person not take on too much in its efforts at growth. Perhaps it is more advisable to take one area where one feels he is in something of a rut and make a concerted effort at growing in that area, whether it be more care in one's Shabbos observance, Torah learning, prayer, guarding one's speech, marriage, parenting, or any number of areas. If one really dedicates himself to grow, then surely the lessons of Pesach will enable him to succeed. Now, what is meant to be by being holy? So God began to instruct Moshe regarding the code of conduct the Jewish people are called upon to follow in order to be holy. While some of these rules do go beyond what most people would consider normally required behavior, many, such as honoring parents, not stealing or robbing, etc., seem to be generally accepted norms. But the pasuk, the verse says, "Kedoshim to you, ki kadosh ani Hashem Elokeichem." You must be holy, for I, God, your God, am holy. The Hebrew word for holy, kadosh, means separate, removed, and beyond. God is absolutely and infinitely holy, for inasmuch as he created the world, he is beyond it, unlimited by time, space, or any other of its attributes. Thus, by being told that we are to be holy because God is holy, we are being told that we are able to partake of God's otherness, that the heights of holiness we can reach are infinite, just as God is infinite. This means that as Jews, we are intended to live with the awareness that the laws of nature pose no contradiction to divinity. There is no aspect of life that is beyond our capacity to elevate, so long as we are connected to God and act in accordance with his will. Therefore, we can sanctify all aspects of our lives, even the most self-understood and commonplace. We should consider everything that we do to be part of our divine mission, a way of bringing God into the world and making it into his home. The easiest thing is to hide from the world and its follies, seclude oneself in a room, and be a holy hermit. What the Torah desires, however, is that a person should be part and parcel of all the congregation of the children of Israel and still be holy, says the Al-Shich. Now, being holy through moderation. Sanctify yourselves also regarding that which is permissible to you, says the Gemara in Yevamos. The meaning of this is that since the Torah has warned against forbidden sexual relations and forbidden foods, while permitting relations with one's wife and eating meat and wine, the lustful person can find a place to wallow with his wife or wives and be of the guzzlers of wine and the gluttons of meat, and partake at will of all licentious things, since no prohibition against this is specified in the Torah. In the sage's parlance, he can be a novel Bereshus HaTorah, a hedonist with the Torah's permission. Therefore, after enumerating the things which it forbids entirely, the Torah says, "Be holy, constrain yourself even in that which is permitted," says the Ramban, Nachmanides. Similarly, the first dictum we heard from Rab Shneur Zalman of Liadi was, "What is forbidden one must not, what is permitted one need not." That's from Rabbi Mordechai of Haradok. Now, a slippery slope. Al tifnu el ha'alilim velokei masecha lo sasu lachem. Turn not to idols, nor make to yourselves molten gods. At first, they will be just idols, but if you turn to them, you will end up making them gods, says Rashi. Now, the severity of telling tales. Lo seilech rochel ba'amecha lo se'amod al dam riacha. You shall not go about as a talebearer amongst your people. You shall not stand by your fellow's blood. Said Rabbi Yitzchak, one who bears tales is a murderer. As it is written, you shall not go about as a talebearer amongst your people. Then immediately following, you shall not stand by your fellow's blood. Loving others and ourselves. So a Gentile, as in the well-known story, came before Shammai and said to him, "I wish to convert to Judaism on the condition that you teach me the whole Torah while I stand on one foot." Shammai drove him away with the builder's cubit which was in his hand. When he came before Hillel, Hillel said to him, "What is hateful to you, do not do to your neighbor. This is in the entire Torah, the rest is commentary, go and learn it." Why did Hillel say that this is the entire Torah? Granted that it is the essence of all mitzvahs governing our behavior between man and man, but the Torah also includes many mitzvahs that are in the realm of between man and God. In what way, therefore, is the mitzvah v'ahavta l'reacha kamocha, to love your fellow as yourself, the essence of mitzvahs such as praying or ceasing work on Shabbos? The explanation can be found in the answer to another question. How is it possible to love another as yourself? Are not self and fellow two distinct entities? So that however closely they may be bound, the other will always be other and never wholly as the self. As physical beings, one's self and one's fellow are indeed two distinct entities. As spiritual beings, however, they are ultimately one, for all souls are of a single essence, united in their source in God. As long as one regards the physical self as the true I, and the soul as something that I have, one will never truly love the other as oneself. But if the soul is the I, and the body but its tool and extension, one can come to recognize that self and fellow are but two expressions of a singular essence, so that all that one desires for oneself, one equally desires for one's fellow. Otherwise stated, the endeavor to love one's fellow as oneself is the endeavor to cultivate one's own spiritual identity, to see the soul and spirit as the true and ultimate reality, and the body and the material as extraneous and subservient to it. Thus, this is the entire Torah, says Rabbi Shneur Zalman of Liadi. Now, love of others leads to love of God. Again, the pasuk states, "V'ahavta l'reacha kamocha," love your fellow as yourself. Love of a fellow is the first gate leading into the palace of God. To love a fellow is to love God, because you are children unto the Lord your God, it says in Deuteronomy. One who loves a father loves his children, therefore. Love your fellow as yourself is an elaboration and elucidation upon, and you shall love the Lord your God. When one loves one's fellow, one loves God, for one's fellow contains within himself a part of God above. Thus, by loving one's fellow, the innermost part of him, one loves God. Says the Baal Shem Tov. The three loves, in fact, love of God, love of Torah, and love of one's fellow, are one. One cannot differentiate between them, for they are of a single essence. And since they are of a single essence, each one embodies all three. So if you see a person who has a love of God but lacks a love of Torah and a love of his fellow, you must tell him that his love of God is incomplete. And if you see a person who has only a love for his fellow, you must strive to bring him to a love of Torah and a love of God. That his love towards his fellow should not only be expressed in providing bread for the hungry and water for the thirsty, but also to bring them close to Torah and to God. When we will have the three loves together, we will achieve the redemption. For just as this last exile was caused by a lack of brotherly love, so shall the final and immediate redemption be achieved by love for one's fellow, says the Lubavitcher Rebbe. Now, to love all Jews, love your fellow as yourself. One must love the lowliest of men as much as the greatest Torah scholar, says again the Baal Shem Tov. Now, judging others, again the pasuk love your fellow as yourself. Our sages have said, do not judge your fellow until you have stood in his place. It says in Pirkei Avos at the Ethics of the Fathers. Since the only person in whose place you can truly stand is yourself, this means that you are qualified to judge only yourself. Regarding yourself, you must condemn your moral and spiritual failings and be critical of your every achievement. Regarding your fellow, however, you must employ a double standard. Your love and esteem toward him should be amplified by every positive quality you see in him, and should not be affected in the least by any seemingly negative things you might observe. Rab Shneur Zalman of Liadi. When I was 4 years old, I asked my father, why did God make people with two eyes? Why not with one eye, just as we have been given a single nose and a single mouth? Said Father, there are things upon which one must look with the right eye, with affection and empathy, and there are things upon which one must look with the left eye, severely and critically. On one's fellow man, one should look with the right eye. On oneself, one should look with a left eye. That's Rabbi Yosef Yitzchak of Lubavitch. Now, loving oneself. As many have observed, the formulation of the mitzvah of loving your fellow as yourself presumes that a person loves himself. If the Torah commands us to love others the way we love ourselves, it implicitly works off the assumption that we love ourselves. Certainly there are some people who are guilty of loving themselves too much, who are self-absorbed and excessively focused on themselves and their own wishes and desires. However, there are also, unfortunately, people who fail to fulfill this aspect of the mitzvah, who do not love themselves, or who do not love themselves sufficiently. They deem themselves unworthy of happiness or success, and do not acknowledge their potential or their capacity for greatness. Rav Tzadok HaKohen writes that just as a person must believe in Hashem, he must also believe in himself. After all, every individual contains within himself a chelek Elokai mimal, a piece of Hashem himself. And just as we must recognize the great value and worth of others, we must also recognize this about ourselves. As important as it is to keep one's ego in check and to avoid excessive pride and self-confidence, it is no less important to believe in oneself, in one's potential for greatness, and in the lofty mission for which Hashem brought us into the world. Now, finally, forbidden relationships. So God instructed Moshe to tell the Jewish people, Ani Hashem Elokeichem asher hivdalti eschem min ha'amim. I am Hashem your God who has distinguished you from other peoples by giving you my laws. Feelings of love toward another person can be very strong. So strong, in fact, that they might cause us to consider defying the Torah's prohibitions or even forsaking God altogether if we become attached to someone forbidden to us. God therefore reminds us that He, the creator of the world and the source of love, issued these prohibitions, so we should not expect any positive outcome from transgressing them. Should we ask why God implanted in us the ability to become so strongly attached to another person that it might compel us to defy Him? The answer is, in order to reward us commensurately for overcoming this challenge, we can be assured that God can be relied upon to reward us amply when we comply with his will. And that's the end of Parsha Acharei Mos Kedoshim. We'll be back next week with Parsha Emor, God willing. And until then, have a great week. Shavua Tov. All the best. Shalom.